Mike from around the world. How are you doing, Mike?
Hello.
Hello, Mike.
Hey, Pastor Paul, I got you okay.
All right. So how's things going tonight?
Well, the equipment's not quite working right, but everything else is good.
All right. Well, I don't like that, but hey, let me just say quickly, you sound great tonight, and we got a great crowd of folks gathering in to find out what's going on around the world. And what can I say? We've just had a major breakthrough, a big, huge signed deal between the United Arab Emirates and Israel. What does this mean, Mike? Is this what you meant by we might be talking about some policy changes? Or are you talking about President Trump's executive orders on taxes and things? What are you talking about?
Well, this is a big foreign policy change. This is a huge foreign policy change, something that nobody has ever been able to do before. So I would call this the biggest foreign policy change in history.
You're exactly right. No one's been able to do this. Trump pulls this off, and he gets Israel to back down on going after that portions of the West Bank that they said they were going to take. They didn't say they would never do it, but they did say they'd suspend it. And at the same time, he gets an Arab nation, a Muslim nation, to recognize Israel as a nation, to put in embassies and set up ambassadors, and they're going to be flying planes out of Dubai straight into Tel Aviv and tourism. And Israel says, hey, bring all the people you want to come and pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. Mike, this is the biggest Middle East thing to happen in history since Israel became a nation in 48.
Yeah, this is enormous. It really is. And, happening so quick at this volatile time is a very bold move. And in fact, I'm probably quite confident a lot of people don't understand the gravity of what happened and what this is leading to. Because this, we're just talking about Saudi princes last week also.
Yes.
Concerning King Salman and his sons, King Abdullah, and then he died. And so it was Markin and Naif and all these other guys. And so we're dealing with that same bloodline. This thing is in motion. This thing is really in motion. Never would anybody ever suspect King Abdullah's direct bloodline to be involved in some type of peace accord with Israel by way of recognition. Also, that's unprecedented. That really is something that has never happened before. But you can also see why I also say that they're going to wipe Saudi Arabia off the map, because now, by that position of Saudi Arabia, they've got to change their tactics. They have to change some of their interactions, which is the opposite side of that, the balanced side of that concerning future events would be you're going to see a very strong coalition of individuals get together, and Syria is going to be involved, Lebanon will be involved, Iraq will be involved, Egypt will eventually be involved. They're going to try and stay neutral, but you got to watch the Egyptian army and their clearance and what they're about to do. They have a deflector, effectively a defector. Israel sides with Greece. And so we have all these components lining up, perfectly. And I would call this the dawn of things. And the reason why is because from let's just say the lineage of what's happening right now, the major events will likely unfold. I'll be bold enough to say that, because this is not just a political move, and this is not just political acceptance. This is something that deals with all the Muslims. This is something that deals with very, let's just say, their sanctified things over there. And if you think about the Muslims and how strong-headed they are concerning their directions, right? They wouldn't permit this to happen with Israel right in the middle of it. They just wouldn't permit this, but there were some lines crossed, and these are permanent lines now. Nobody ever thought they would ever see this at the beginning of the year,
No.
But these are permanent lines crossed. Anybody who recognizes Israel, who enters into any type of accord with the Western world and then acknowledges Israel, is permanently severed from, some of the more extremist faith-based organizations in the Middle East, which, by the way, is just about all of them. And so who would sever themselves like that? Who would move like that unless they had the backing of some very powerful forces? But what this puts into play, you'll get to see Russia's moves, both politically. They're going to be talking to Israel in a few days. Putin will. He's going to have to. His hand is now effectively forced. And the balance of that, of course, is what happens in Lebanon and Syria and Turkey now, all three together. You're going to see an alliance, a strength of an alliance build, slowly but surely, deceitfully. They'll begin to work it. You know what? It almost lines up with the book of Daniel, and because most of what's going on in the scene behind the scenes is extremely deceitful. In fact, there's a intelligence war right now. Of course, we have the cyber differences, but the intelligence war is going on. And believe me, when I say deceitful, I do not believe anybody really recognizes the definition of that word. There are a lot of serpents in the Middle East, and there are defectors over here in the U.S., and we have, there's some real issues that we have right now. This is a statement. This is something that will unleash and force the hand of many players from this day forward. This is going to continue to build. Hands will be forced. Positions will be solidified. People will begin to see it. I guarantee you, in a couple of days, you're going to start hearing people say, well, so-and-so is getting their army ready. So-and-so is getting their army ready. Fuel orders went out tonight. You have all these folks who are ordering fuel tonight. They do that for their jets. They're ordering fuel. We got to fulfill those commitments also. So everybody is getting ready. We're pulling our troops out of Germany, right? And so Germany is going to be in certain places of Germany will be left to their own devices, but they will also have miniature coalitions with other forces because they know precisely what's coming. I just hope the saints know what's coming, and I hope they stick with the Bible. I know what they see can be quite confusing. People will argue, well, this is it, this isn't it. That's not the point. The point is, this will lead to much bigger things. We've never been at this scale before. This is truly a global movement. And I hope that people can understand it.
It is huge, Mike, and you just said it. Lines have been crossed that cannot be changed. When an Arab nation, especially a wealthy, very wealthy nation, and technically advanced and very articulate in its its process of evolving, with deep ties within the United States and around the world. The United Arab Emirates crossing a line that no Arab nation would dare to cross. Jordan has always been close to Israel historically, and Egypt as well, and they've had their issues over the centuries. But those agreements have been in place for many, many years. All of a sudden, as you say, we have an Arab nation recognizing Israel as a nation and building embassies and are going to have ambassadors and are going to create tourism between these two nations. This is huge. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Who is this guy, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed? Is he a wild card? Is this guy got guts? I mean, what's the story here with this man? Because what he's done is the boldest move in the Middle East in many centuries.
Well, these guys are on the inside. And he's not doing it by himself. That's why he's so bold in what he's doing. That's why he's so unorthodox as to what he's doing. When they know they have backing, they know they have the upper hand right now too, because they have the assistance of the West. So there are some very deep ties in this. This guy will naturally, he's going to begin to travel. I'll put it that way. He'll travel to he'll be in a lot of places. He has direct ties to royalty in a real deep sense of that word, to royalty. So this guy's going to move freely to several different places, and he's proclaiming quite a few things. Now, will he be able to accomplish it? He'll be able to accomplish the majority of it, but it's going to come at a cost. And I believe that everybody knows that cost, but what people don't understand is this. There have been so many months, and calculations have been going on and on and on and on. Casualty counts have already been counted. They already know how many casualties there will be should somebody make a move. They already know where they're going to have everything positioned. They already know this. This was being planned in January. So there's some pretty bold moves, which effectively forces, this is going to force Turkey and Russia, Iran. You can't count Iran out. They're going to be squeezed. But I'll tell you this. There's some folks who understand, and Iran makes them nervous. And I think that everybody will eventually find that out, because Iran, to most people, Iran is because no one speaks propaganda-wise about Iran. It's nothing. They're like a fly. But in truth, they're not. They're organizers. They're much larger than anyone would think, because you have Iran, you have Yemen, you have Oman, they're surrounding several different quadrants, tactfully. You have wild cards like Turkey. We don't know their loyalty in its entirety. You have these secret places in Sudan where armies have been building up in number. Which drives the AFRICOM commander crazy, because he has to keep track of all these things in Africa. So we really have a positioning of most of the components that were ever said that they were going to be in prophecy, but bigger than that, Pastor Paul, we have the rebirth. You're going to see the forced rebirth of a kingdom that was dead. The forced rebirth, because now this line, Saudi Arabia is huge. Yeah. Saudi Arabia has very rich assets inside of it, and people need those things besides Iran. Iran is the other place. And now Saudi Arabia has been secured by the West. It's been effectively secured. This is almost like it's almost like a declaration of war within itself.
So you're saying, of course, is what we call the Muslim monarchies. Okay, so you're talking Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, Algeria, Bahrain, all these guys are Sunni, but basically Sunni Muslims. And then you got the other side, and all of a sudden the West is with them and Israel, because the bad guy is always going to be looked at as Iran, the Shiite Muslims, but Iran teaming up with about half of Iraq, Syria with Bashar al-Assad, and all their proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Islamic Jihad, all those guys, and then the wild card, Turkey, and what about Russia? And I'm going to throw another one in. What about China? Because China has put together a huge $400 billion deal with Iran, and China is advancing in Africa. They're building military bases.
Yes, they are.
So
yes, they are.
This is a world it's like the world is choosing sides, and it might be, now the Bible does say, Mike, and you know this, that the covenant with many, and it talks about it in Daniel 9:27, and most of us kind of pictured this 7-year or some kind of a deal, and everybody signed their name to it. But what we might be going to see is United Arab Emirates says, I'll make a covenant with you, Israel. Then let's say, here comes another one. Kuwait says, I'll make a covenant with you. And then here comes Qatar, and then maybe even Saudi Arabia. And these are Israel making a covenant with many. This may be the beginning when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction.
It could be. It could lead right up to that. In the book of Daniel, that same covenant, to expand on that covenant, I believe it's Daniel 11:23. After a league made with him, he shall work deceitfully. So this, after he confirms the covenant with many, I believe it says he confirms it. Yeah. So now to confirm a covenant means you accept. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
That's like somebody saying, okay, I accept it.
Yeah.
So if they accept it, they confirm this covenant gets going. Of course, he's going to break it in the middle of the week, but just to confirm it, or this league made with this guy, with this individual, is going to give birth to an alliance of individuals who will then, you know what they do after that? They form up their coalition a few times by way of political speech. They sit down and they try to hash out a deal. But the naval forces that are now opposition, it's just lining up perfectly, because now we have Russia's Navy and we have Israel's Navy out there guarding those waters, which is a big issue for anybody who would try to rush in to Israel to do anything in Israel. They have to go through channels now. They can't get through that Navy. So that's a discouragement. Even that setup, because you remember when Russia came over, they never left. They set up a naval base over there, Russia did. So they are there permanently. In fact, you could call Syria right now, Russia. You could call it that. Of course, Putin is not making his appearances over there like he did, but his assets are still in that country, and Damascus looks horrible. I mean, it looks terrible over there. It's done for. It looks terrible.
It looks exactly, Mike, what the Bible said it would be in Isaiah 17:1. It's become a ruinous heap, and it really is. And I've seen pictures of, you've seen it, the drones that go over. It's horrible. It's an ungodly place to live. And you're right, Putin really is running Syria for the most part. Assad has been living in a bunker for 9 years, him and his family. He's not in charge. And Turkey is taking shots at the Kurds, and everybody wants the oil, and Turkey's really getting wild. I mean, what are they doing? They're trying to take the Kurds out. They want to get part of Syria's oil. They want to take over Libya, and then they want to take on Greece and go drill in their waters. I mean, is Erdogan getting desperate? Is because he wants to rebirth the Ottoman Empire, or does he think he's the caliphate? He thinks he's the one, doesn't he?
He wants to be the one. And he wants to be the one, but the people are saying, no, not really. That's what the people are saying, because they're not in consensus with him being the one. Although the real one, right, is not going to say, and in the beginning, I'm the one. The people are going to go and grab him. I think we're close to that event. But I know certainly when I see it, because we're seeing some movements now. If you watch carefully in the Middle East, you're seeing the whole Muslim faith is changing, right? It is changing. I know not to get too deep into that, because I had to study all these things, but you have some that follow the hadith. It's called the hadith, is what they follow.
Yeah.
And but in that's growing by leaps and bounds, and this is probably the key reason why they grab who they grab, naming this individual, pulling this individual back. And but you see all these elements, this formation of elements. Now, unfortunate for everybody else, I know that this is right now it's brand new. We haven't seen the unbalanced part of it, which is almost like poking a hornet's nest, right? Because you're going to have pushback. You're going to have a lot of pushback. In the middle of this pushback, armies have already positioned themselves, right? Defense networks have already gone up. In fact, there have been, this weekend, there were missile deployments all throughout the Middle East. There were systems checks all throughout the Middle East. There were anti-missile systems, brand new ones, put up all throughout the Middle East, and the rest are being sold by Israel to other nations so that everybody can have missile defense, because they know what's coming. They know it's unavoidable. And even in the middle of a slight conflict, it will seem slight at first. And believe me, it's not going to take long, Pascal, unfortunately, for this to kick off. I mean, we're seeing events ignite. Somebody lit the match.
Yes.
This is like a match.
You think, right? Yeah, and let me ask you a question, because we want to talk a little bit about deep state here in the world, and I'm not going to just say just America, but you saying somebody lit a match because what you're feeling is lines have been crossed that now, this line was huge. Let me ask you, Mohammed bin Zayed, he is 59 years old. He is the Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. He is the crown prince of United Arab Emirates, but he's also the Deputy Supreme Commander of the United Arab Emirates Armed Forces. This guy's a military guy on top of that. Is he the one?
Identification of this individual. Right now, in my mind, I'm looking at two individuals, right? I'm looking at two individuals. But this guy has the qualifications for so much. I mean, he really does have qualifications so much. He really looks like he would fit that bill, because the very one that leads in the Middle East has a tactical mind. But there is another. There's another. And I'll have to give you something real odd. Weird things happen in the Middle East, just in case Americans don't know this. Very strange things happen in the Middle East. It is a different world altogether. And when you're talking about leadership, they have loyalties to things, that the average person wouldn't believe. And they're about 20 steps ahead as far as anything being publicized. So there's a following of this guy right now, right? There's a following of this guy, Pastor Paul, and if that following begins to grow, they're going to drag him into a position that he didn't ask for. But I tell you this, he's going to start traveling all over the place. He does have a tactical mind. He's a good negotiator, and he's quite bold. He's odd to be from Saudi. He's just odd.
Right. He's and just imagine, in just a few weeks, you're going to see this man, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, and Benjamin Netanyahu standing in the White House with President Donald Trump. And that might be during the gathering or just before the United Nations. I look for this guy to be speaking at the United Nations. And maybe his speech will be calling on other Arab world leaders to come follow him in bringing about some type of global peace. This is going to be huge. When the UN comes together in the middle of a COVID crisis. And people are wondering, Mike, folks, I want to say right now, this is Mike from Around the World from Council of Time with us today. Over 4,400 of you are with us on our YouTube channel. We want to say God bless each and every one of you. Now, Mike, the deep state, people are asking questions. I put a picture up on our on the thumbnail tonight. We put a lot of these guys up here, from James Comey to James Clapper, Susan Rice, President Obama, all of them, Hillary Clinton, we can go on, McCabe, we can go on forever. All these different people, we know their names now. They talked about secret societies within the U.S. government. They've talked about the deep state. But the question is now, Mike, there's questions people are asking. Do you see lockdown? Because the CDC just announced tonight that the worst health season in the history of the world is getting ready to happen this fall with COVID. They just announced it. They said, look out. This will be the worst time in the history of the world for health. Do you see the United States locking down, shutting down, locking down, citizen containment type mentality to try to get through the winter? Is there something going on right now that maybe you can help us with that we just don't know yet?
Well, let me see if I can throw some hints out there. So we have COVID-19, right? And what is COVID-19 actually doing besides, killing over 200,000 people? What is it actually doing? It's causing people's behaviors to change. But in what way is it causing people's behaviors to change? It doesn't matter how many people fight the mask or go with the mask. That's a non-issue. That's a foolish issue. They want people to argue about that so they never notice the meat of what's happening. It was never about the mask. It was never about any of those things. It was about the behaviors of individuals. In every single operation and counter-intelligence operation, to change the behavior of people is priority. You do whatever you can do to bring about that change in the behaviors of people. Why are they doing this? If you get a person used to a routine, and we're not talking about the mask, then throw the mask out. Don't think about the mask. But if you change the routine of a person, right, under unfamiliar conditions, they resort back to the routine. The routine becomes home. It becomes normal. Even if it's odd at the onset, it becomes their natural behavior. People operate in that way. In other words, if you train a person to do a specific task every single day, at first they may complain about it. They may not like it. You keep doing that to that individual, and then all of a sudden what happens is you bring about some sort of calamity upon them. Now, something very interesting happens. They forget about their old habits, right? And they begin to adopt or act in part with their new habits they were taught. So, what is this really about? In changing the behaviors of people, guess what they're prepared to do? They're used to, number one, following directions, right? They're used to waiting in line, following directions. They can fuss, they can do all what they want to do, but they're standing in those lines. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. I recently went to a grocery store. I saw people lined up, they were trying to get in there because of social distancing. I heard people say, I'm not putting on a mask, but they were all standing in line. I heard another couple say, yep, they should put on a mask, everybody should, but they were standing in line. So behaviors have changed. Also, expectations have changed. When you go into a place, because it's less dense than it usually is, that's called a controlled environment. So they're teaching everybody to operate within a controlled environment, and they're also teaching people to like it. So what's happening is a person may get into a store. What if they said, take off your mask? Everybody would say, such a relief. But it's not, because you still can only have a certain number of people in the store. The merchandise is dwindling on the shelves, and they're waiting in lines. So with this trained behavior, they're also doing it with cars. Checkpoints are being put up for COVID-19, and that'll be implemented probably in about a month for COVID-19, where in order to get through certain barriers or certain checkpoints or certain places, possibly from town to town, you're going to have your temperature taken. They're going to ask you, where are you going? Because I can look at the U.S. right now, and you know what I see? It reminds me of the first time when I was introduced into the wrong side of Germany, is what it reminds me of, before the wall was taken down. It reminds me of controlled movements of everybody, and how successful they have done this. It doesn't matter the mechanism they use. They're changing behaviors, and while people are fighting over the nuances of COVID-19, over whether to wear a mask or not, and all these topics that they have invented themselves because people are laughing at them, their behavior has been effectively changed. Now, it kind of gets to me, and I have to watch myself because I can't stand people to be duped in that way, right? And I see people, they have passionate causes, but the cause of which they're passionate toward means nothing.
So are you saying
putting on well, it's just like the mask issue, putting on or taking off a mask. People are they feel strongly about this, right? But they don't feel strongly about seatbelts. They don't feel strongly about putting shoes on, going to a store. And so what I'm saying is they have to reset their mind back in reality, and they have to look at their life, their individual life, their life with freedoms, and say what has really changed.
So what's happening?
Move in the U.S. has changed.
So, Mike, you're saying what we're experiencing is a social conditioning, citizen containment, and behavioral realignments, a little bit like a lab rat. We're being reconditioned, we're being reprogrammed, we're being controlled, and little by little our freedoms, our constitutional freedoms, are literally being pulled out from underneath it. Churches right now, Mike, cannot have more than 250 people in them. You've got churches across America that seat 1,000, 2,000, 10,000. I mean that are only got 250 people sitting in there. Okay, so and they've surrendered their right to gather. We've lost certain freedoms, and we're being reconditioned. Is that what you say is going on? So the deep state is controlling us using the CDC or maybe other non-elected officials?
Well, let's say all mechanisms. Let me give you a small example of something of how often we can focus on one thing but miss what has already happened. So let's take freedom of speech, for example, right? Or your right to privacy. Let's take that, for example.
Okay.
Now, everybody knows that in 2000, and I believe it was 2006, they surrendered their right to privacy. Everybody's aware of that, right? Everybody surrendered their right to privacy, and they willingly did so, right? Because on the cell phones, they said, hey, guys, we can't have analog anymore. We're going to have to go to digital.
Yeah.
But in order to go to digital, you're going to have to get a different phone. And when you get this different phone, there's a contract with the phone. And essentially, that contract says nothing on the phone is yours. That you surrender everything, your conversations and everything else. You're surrendering all rights to the information you put on the phone for the purposes of transmission. And so you've surrendered that right. You've surrendered your right to a private conversation, because each component in the phone is also covered by that EULA. It's called a EULA. And so when you look in there, you're going to find out that any conversation you have around that device that it should record, should pick up or do anything else, you have willingly traded off so that you can utilize the phone. So what they've got, they take up the rights, they extend no rights. They extend you room, right, to exercise yourself on occasion. But as far as rights, what rights do people really have? Because is there a real right to freedom of speech? Because if you speak in certain ways now, they're going to your avenue to speech is going to be cut off.
Yeah.
You're going to be blocked from the internet and everything else. That's been going on for a long time. And while everybody's still focusing, saying they're going to take away something, we've already surrendered everything, and people don't really understand that. The second thing is this, Pastor Paul. When people are talking about, you know, they're gonna do so and so to us, and well, just like the churches, right? When you look from the outside of the churches, it's a shocker, because now they can't assemble in the numbers they want, you know, with a lot of people, naturally, because of COVID-19. Most people would think, right? But how about this? How about they have changed the way churches run? Because according to law, federal law, and the status of your business, you're already limited in what you can do. And if you don't stay within the confines of those limitations, you're in breach of a contract, which means you'll no longer be covered under certain license agreements to operate your organization. So what they did was they slide these restrictions in, right? 10 years later, somebody reads it, and then they keep up the conversation about other things, other rights, which are being taken away. In the meanwhile, we've signed away our rights. They do this every single time because we want. They know that the number one human problem that we have is to gain. Well, in this world, in order to gain, you're going to have to sign something, right? So if you want something, you're going to have to give something up. So you end up signing a contract, and you don't even know it. And believe me, they're starting to utilize the clauses in those contracts. And this is why some of the pastors who were outspoken in the beginning, they're not saying a word now, because they know they already signed that contract. This is sneaky stuff.
Yeah.
It's real sneaky stuff.
The folks, Mike around the world with us, explain how deep the deep state is, and also the peace agreement that just was signed today by United Arab Emirates and Israel, and they'll have a formal signing coming up in a couple of weeks or 2 or 3 weeks. Mike, also people are asking in the chat room, what about the asteroids? September 1st is coming. We got one that's going to go skimming by, but they're also interested in those 2 clusters, that incoming debris field, the waves of energy, and Madagascar. You brought up Madagascar. There was actually an earthquake, not in Madagascar, but right across on the African coast this week that was pretty significant, like a 5.4. And I've also been doing a little study, and people have been sending me stuff. Madagascar is setting on a tectonic plate, and there's plumes coming up. So can you tell us a little bit more about Madagascar and the incoming debris asteroids? Let's start with the asteroids.
Well, some of the asteroids, for example, I believe in about 5 days, we're going to have some flybys, right? I know we're in the historic meteor shower, but we're going to have some flybys. And they're also noticing some pretty large clumps that have gone by already. These 2 clusters are massive. They're massive, Pastor Paul. There are indications of a slow buildup right now, as far as if you took a week and counted what's coming through. You can't do it day by day. You have to do it by the week, due to the volume that's out there. Because if you do it day by day, you'll have a lot one day, none the next, so on and so forth. If you do it week by week, you get a pretty good idea of what's coming. Now, that debris before these 2 clusters is a telltale sign that these 2 clusters are back there. Not to mention there's some gases coming with it, which is one of my worries, because I know it's going to make some folks sick. Our atmosphere is going to begin to change in a way we don't want it to change, because all this inbound debris is going to change the chemistry of our atmosphere and introduce new types of gases into the atmosphere. And we're just going to have to deal with that, which is probably why a lot of people have been experiencing well, people at higher altitudes, they seem to feel okay, but at lower altitudes, their taste buds are changing, right? Some of the things they used to eat, they can't even touch it anymore. Strange bone diseases. And what I mean by that, bone degeneration has increased over the last 2 years beyond belief. So it's a real problem, bone degeneration. Is
that because of radiation and it's coming? And oh, by the way, we had 112 mile an hour straight line winds that started in Nebraska, and when it got into Iowa, it just destroyed 10 million acres of corn. A third of Iowa's corn was broken down. I mean, and these winds came across Wisconsin. Chicago was hit with 90 mile an hour. We got 70 mile an hour here in West Lafayette, Indiana. So, Mike, is that part of that atmospheric compression?
Oh yeah, and that was a tiny derecho. That was a derecho, a tiny one. That was a small, tiny one. In fact, that one followed the same track, the exact same track as the one that came through, I believe it was 2010. I believe it was 2010, 11, 12, something like that. Yeah, it was a tiny one. So take that derecho, and as we continue to go through this phenomenon, imagine a derecho that stretches from Montana all the way down to, Baja California, and it sweeps across the country, because that means the winds will lay many things to waste. Without a tornado, and as I said before, we're nearly approaching the time when people will be terrified of thunderstorms. If they forecast a thunderstorm, people are going to really be stressed over it, because the power involved in it. Some of the wind turbulences that were recorded, right, miles away from that derecho, with the winds going straight up vertical at 113 miles an hour. You know what that's getting close to, Pastor Paul? That's getting close to supporting at least a 50-pound ball of ice, right? What? The winds are increasing as far as how they go up, and what's happening is...
You said 50, you just said 50-pound ball of ice. Now, the Bible does say in Revelation, I think it's chapter 11, it does say that the hailstones will fall that weigh as much as a talent, which is somewhere between 50 and 75 pounds. So you're saying because of the updraft of wind, it's going to create 50-pound hail balls?
Yeah, here's it. Just like that prophecy, Pastor Paul. That's I believe, this is my opinion. All right, this is my opinion. I believe we're going to build up to that. Here's what I'm saying. I believe that beginning this year, right, we have seen some pretty sizable hail. I believe that from this moment forward, that hail is going to become larger and larger. In fact, if you took away everything else, just by the storms and any thunderstorms that form over the U.S., hail is going to damage at least 70% of our infrastructure. The winds will take care of the rest. In fact, winds and storms will they'll probably be responsible for destroying at least 80% of our infrastructure as the days go forward. So in other words, we're going to be battered by winds, and of course the winds produce these higher volume of substance that can be sustained in the atmosphere and then falling back to Earth. This, in conjunction with meteor storms, you're looking at all these things coming, but they're happening all at one time. Right? So, like the Bible says, hail, the size 50 pounds or greater.
Yep. Mike, you still there? Mike, are you still there?
This year coming up, if we get that far without a war. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you went out for about 10 seconds there.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm back anyway. But a buildup, right? A buildup, that means... every time we have a storm, we're going to notice some very strange and odd behavior from those storms, from electrical discharge, sustained plasma conduits coming down from the clouds, sustaining maybe 10, 15, 20 seconds to the earth. They've already thrown out lightning always. You know how they said lightning doesn't strike in the same place twice?
Oh, that's...
Just the other day, they recorded lightning hitting 294 times in about a 20-meter radius. So yeah, it just kind of tore up certain places, and that's without any grounding rods or anything.
There was some plasma lightning, and I actually saw some video of that hitting a tall tower in China that was incredible. And we got that on video, and we actually showed it in one of our videos we did. And I was thinking about you and these thunderbolts coming down. So in other words, the clusters are coming. The clusters are huge. They're right now somewhere approaching Jupiter, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the clusters, the way they're lined out, it's almost like think of a concentrated set of objects in the middle, right? But miles, hundreds of miles out in a radius, in a radial type of view, you're looking at dust and smaller clumps and debris and things of that nature. Most of which, I know certain bands are formed of ice. Ice, that's gases. And those things are going to come close to they're going to smack our planets, what they're going to do. So in the atmosphere, when this takes place, basketball is going to increase certain static potentials by at least 113% or 130%, I'm sorry, which means a static potential is bad for electronics. We really don't need an EMP to disrupt our electrical grid. We have enough static, potential of static that will be right here on Earth that we're going to have some damage to our grid and more things without an EMP. While we're in a civil war.
Okay, now, one more thing. We're running out of time, and we've got people who want to make sure I ask this question. The president is now saying, okay, Russia says they got a vaccine. Russia says they got it. Israel says they got one. Trump says we got one coming real soon, maybe by October. But the military's going to deliver it. His words, the military's going to deliver the vaccine. Yet when they did a poll, they brought Bill Gates and put him on CNN with Anderson Cooper and Sanjay Gupta. And they were trying to warm Bill Gates up back to the public because right now nobody really trusts him. What does President Trump mean the military is going to deliver the vaccine? Can you help us understand that?
Well, you know what? First of all, you know I'm unbiased, right? I'm unbiased. I'm a neutral guy. Everybody should know I'm unbiased.
Okay.
Pastor, to answer that question would take us about an hour to answer that question. There's some real things. There's some real issues taking place. There's a precept to that. If I were to say, if he wants the military to deliver that, he can implement that. Based on certain emergency powers, he can do that. But I'll say it again, that's based on certain emergency powers. And one more time, that's based on certain emergency powers. In order for any president to enact emergency powers, the situation must warrant that as an emergency. And that should give you a clue of what our immediate future looks like, right? Because certain declarations, certain intentions require us to be in a pretty bad predicament in order to do that. And right now we only have the 200,000 deaths right now, right? That means that number would have to significantly increase, or be on the verge of increasing significantly in order for that to happen. So conditions will likely warrant him doing that. But as far as why would he select the military to do that over the medical institutions, what's already in position, that would take us an hour to get through. I really don't believe people understand the nature of what's happening. This is a war. This is a war, ladies and gentlemen, and it is a real war. But for some reason, some of the internal motivations that people had in 2012, it's gone. When all that failed in 2012, it zapped prophecy out of people, and they're not very tuned to prophecy. You still have your fire lit, but there are a lot of people who don't have a fire anymore, and when they don't have that fire, they won't investigate. Right? And these things, they require investigation, because what you're going to dig up is probably not what anybody wants to know. Nevertheless, it is the truth of the matter. But I'll say this, I really cannot give you the backdrop on that except for what I said, but I'll say this, we are really at war. We have never been in this predicament before. This predicament is not going away, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of lives.
It's
just not going away.
One of the things, Mike, I'm just reading here, this just came out 6 hours ago. Forced isolation may be the only way to stop the resurgence of the virus. Flare-ups from Australia to Japan now show the world hasn't learned an early lesson from the coronavirus crisis. To stop the spread, those with mild or symptom-free coronavirus infections must be forced to isolate, both from their communities and their families. In Australia, where Victoria State has been reporting record deaths, 3,000 checks last month on people who should have been isolated at home found that 800 of those people were out and about. The world must force isolation. So when you say the president has certain emergency powers, but he has to declare a certain emergency, and for there to be an emergency, I'm hearing you say there needs to be probably even more considerable deaths from this situation or from something. Are we getting ready to see a winter of forced isolation and maybe forced vaccination?
We're looking at a whole life change. Yeah, This is something when we talked about civilian containment a long time ago.
Yes.
The centers that they put up then, the centers that they marked, they're still there. They will not remove them, which means eventually they're going to be active. In fact, some of them have been restocked. So, and Jade Helm, some of your tactical movements in Jade Helm, those recall points are stocked. They have recently been stocked. And so what we're looking at is almost like a forced migration of people, period. Now, this goes much further than a person being forced to stay in their homes. This will deal with the relocation of individuals from one state to another.
Okay, you're saying actually relocating people with coronavirus into concentration camps or FEMA camps or relocation camps?
No, Pastor, with any type of emergency powers, there must be a condition to warrant those emergency powers.
Okay.
And the conditions are coming. And see, it's not, I tell you what, in this day and age, what looks like a bad idea, right, is more likely not the bad idea. What looks like a good idea is going to cost you your life or your soul, one or the other. So we're really facing this battle, this war that we're in is a little deeper. It's by no means shallow. It's very deep. And it's so deep, Pastor Paul, that some of the individuals, some of the players, most of the players are not going to be ashamed to just stand up and start saying things. So, but forced relocation, that's a very tragic thing. It's what that is, very tragic things. For example, is you see the protests in the cities. Well, one of the cities has already made a declaration, and they know they're going to have to move people out of that city now. They're going to have to begin right away. There are other cities that will be quarantined. The whole city is going to be quarantined, put checkpoints to get out of the city to go somewhere else. So this is a change of many different things.
China did that.
Well, we're going to do much. China won't, in my opinion, China will not compare to us when this thing is said and done. They will look like they're a democratic, beautiful society compared to what's going to happen.
So do you see this cities can be contained with checkpoints? Do you see this happening this winter?
I would say that it's going to begin in a few places within a few weeks. Because they're going to start. Here's the problem we face. The government is split into two sections. The government is not going to really reconcile, which means you're going to have breakaway elements to the government. They're going to start acting on their own behalf. You're going to see this prior to the elections. You're going to see this fairly soon. They're already tired. They're already starting the breakaway process. Now, this is something that none of us are used to seeing, nor do we have the proper language to discuss all the variables involved. But we're seeing the United States beginning to break apart due to strong disagreements of ideologies. Neither side is going to back down. Warnings have been sent out, but the warnings are not working. And when I say warnings, I mean warnings on the control tier. That would be the President Trumps and some of the billionaires out there. They've been given warnings, but they're just not giving way. And so the next step in this are forced movements. They're going to have to force it. They're going to force some things. A law, if they write a law mandating people do it, they're going to rebel against that law, just like they rebel against the police. And then so we're looking at a split in society, a split in how we operate, and everything is changing right before our eyes. If I were people, I would just remain spiritual when looking at this situation, because if not, you're going to be lost in the rhetoric and you'll lose your spiritual position.
Folks, Mike, we're running out of time here. We've got to pick this back up next week. Can you be with us next Thursday?
Yeah, I'll be glad to do that, because we'll have so much to discuss.
It sounds like, because we're just now getting into this part of it. How deep will this nation go? Well, and of course, Mike will be one of the key speakers for Deep State, October 30th and 31st. And I think by the time we get to that conference, we might already know a little bit more than what we know now, won't we, Mike?
Oh, I'm sure we will. And Pastor Paul, as usual, when we talk again, right, we'll talk about an off subject for sure.
Next week, we're going to talk about an off.
We'll talk about an off subject. Sometimes they throw little curveballs, and then you have to discuss that. But it'll come. You'll see.
We'll see it. Yeah. All right, Mike, thank you so much for being with us. Wow, you kind of laid a couple bombs on us the next few weeks. Citizen containment, city containment, but also people being forced into relocations. That's huge. See you next week, Mike.
All right, Pastor Paul. God bless you.
God bless.